Welcome to the Courage to Live podcast. My name is Josh Bitsko, and I'm a retired police captain with 24 years of experience out of Las Vegas. Currently, I travel the country and I teach people about courage, resilience, and leadership. Joined with my co-host and wife, Jenna.
Hi.
So this is the last part of our 3-part series on fear.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, we talked about like mortal fear, danger in, like policing or just life. The second one, we talked about fear in your career, which I thought was I like the rhyme. I'm not going to lie. So that's going to be that's our title of that one. And then in this one, we're going to talk about fear in your personal life and relationships and how it can, cause a lot of problems if you're, again, allowing that fear to make the decisions for you. And basketball season's in full effect. We're now in our house watching in NBA and college basketball now.
Great time to be alive.
It really is. Generally, I find myself in the kitchen cooking dinner while you're watching the game, which is
Don't make me sound like that. I'm doing other things.
Well, yeah, no, you're not just sitting on the couch with a beer watching.
That would be great, though.
Yeah, we could do that too.
That's a great idea. Actually, yes. I'll sit on the couch with a beer while you cook dinner, and I'll watch basketball. I think this is a great plan.
Yeah. Okay. Noted. I'll put it down. So there's a couple different ways that fear shows up in our personal lives, and they're unique to what we've talked about. Some of the ways to mitigate through them are going to be similar, I think, because it's still that same emotion, that the ways to push yourself through fear is going to be similar, but different enough, I think, that we need to talk about it.
Yeah. And it was really difficult to pinpoint 4 topics that we wanted to talk about for this, because there are so many different ways that fear can show up in your personal life and in your relationship with others. But the first one that we came up with was for all the men out there, fear of vulnerability. And I'm just kidding. It's not just for men. I've known plenty of women with that same fear. So it's just a fear of being vulnerable and kind of what that looks like.
Well, this one is new to me, or at least newer. I was further down my path on like managing fear in life-threatening situations or even at work, putting myself out there. And so, but that fear of vulnerability, I had always just really put up an armor and not shared how I was feeling. There's a lot of reasons for that, like, not feeling safe to, and obviously before you, but trying to learn how to be vulnerable, because I was conditioned as a kid and as a young man by the men in my life that, you don't talk about hard things. You don't talk about things bothering you. You don't talk about that call with that, dead kid and how much that's affected you, because that's you being weak. And it wasn't until later in life when I realized that, no, it's actually strength in being vulnerable. But, before we get into how to overcome it, maybe we could talk more about examples of that fear and how it shows up and some of the, issues it can cause in your life when you don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think especially for, when you're in a dating relationship, that can come up, right? And there's a fear of being vulnerable and putting your feelings out there because you could get rejected or you could be shut down, or even at work, a fear of talking about a call that bothered you, or, some failure that you had, because then again, going back to what we talked about last week, then, there's that fear of looking stupid or weak or whatever. And so, I mean, a fear of being vulnerable can show up in a lot of different ways. But especially interpersonally, it really, that's the thing that kind of just puts you all out there, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And it comes down to, being around people that you feel safe to be vulnerable, because you want to shut somebody down and have them never be vulnerable with you again. Judge them when they're being vulnerable with you.
Yeah.
Like, don't be empathetic or don't validate what they're saying. And I think that that's such a pervasive problem in police work. And yes, I'll say it, around men. And it's, as I learned, I thought it was interesting as I got to a period in my life where I was more comfortable being vulnerable, then I would go, grab a beer or have dinner with a friend. And, we'd be talking about whatever we were talking about, families and work. And if I open that door to like being vulnerable about something that was bothering me, I would see them do it too. It's almost like I'm giving them permission to be vulnerable. And so you can shut people down. You can also open people up just by being vulnerable yourself. But again, if you're not vulnerable in your personal life and your relationship with those connections, it can cause lasting damage in your relationships. Because if I'm not sharing with you why maybe I had a rough call or something's really affecting me and I don't share with you the why, then you're just going to think, well, I'm just being irritable for no reason, or, I'm always in a bad mood or all of that because you don't have the context of what I'm going through. And I think that's a lot of men think a lot of them are carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders and they don't feel that they can share that with anybody else.
I think it's a couple things. Either they don't feel safe with their partner to share it, whether that's they feel like they're going to be criticized for sharing it, or, well, why didn't you do this? I think that's one part of it. And I think it can be that, or it can be this thought that they are, by not sharing or being vulnerable, they're keeping some kind of burden off of their partner, right? So it's like, well, I'm not going to share this heavy thing or this heavy way that I'm feeling because I don't want to put that burden on them. But when you do that, you're also not allowing them that connection. You're not allowing the space and the opportunity for them to give you the connection, the empathy, the validation that you need, right?
Yeah, and help you carry that load.
Right.
And when that's not happening, it can cause that resentment and it can cause relationship issues. And I also think sometimes we use those as excuses to just not have the hard conversation and feel the things that we're feeling.
Yeah.
Like I'll say, oh, I'm not trying to put this all on her, but in reality, I just don't want to have the hard conversation. I don't want to feel the emotions, and avoiding it is easier until it's not, until you find that, you no longer have a strong relationship or a partner and you're just doing all this alone and carrying the stress alone. But a lot of times you choose that.
Yeah, I agree. So how do we mitigate that fear of vulnerability? Because I'll tell you, I was just thinking when you were talking about that, I have a friend who is, I could tell she was going through a really hard time in her life. And at the time we weren't friends enough for me to know exactly what that could be or what that was. And so, I reached out to her and just asked her if she's doing okay. And I offered up, it was so random, but I offered up something that was very vulnerable to me, an experience that I had, and in hopes of, if I share this really vulnerable experience, although it was very random, I'm hoping if I share this experience that it will allow her to feel like she can open up to me if she wants to about what was going on in her life. And it did. And so I think, I have found that, yes, sometimes it's really hard to be vulnerable. Sometimes it's hard to put your heart out there, share a part of you that you feel is, private or whatever. But I can tell you that in doing it, I have found some of my most deepest connections with people. And so I think there's always going to be some fear around being vulnerable, but in doing it and maybe starting out small, starting with like a little piece of vulnerability, and working your way up to, a bigger share, a bigger level of vulnerability, can help. I think too, finding people that are safe people.
Well, yeah, you just said it, right?
Is important.
Like starting small you did that by sharing something small, and that
I mean, I shared something really big, but that's just me. Like, if you know me, I'm like, I'll share anything.
You do. I'm not going to use the word overshare.
I probably am,
but I'm just not going to use the word. That's definitely what you do.
I know.
But in doing that, in starting small, right? Not only did she find a safe person, because that was part of you extending that olive branch, because you could tell she was struggling, but you also found a safe person too. And I think it's healthy to have people outside of your relationship to have, to talk about certain things and to be able to share that. So yeah, finding safe people. And the reality is, and I think a lot of people can, agree with this in their own situations. Sometimes your spouse isn't the safe person.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough to have you, that you are that safe person. But, I think it's good to have people outside of that relationship to have that connection with. And
well, that's a whole other host of problems. If your spouse isn't the person that you can be vulnerable with, you should probably start, looking into that.
Yeah. Work on that maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, starting small, I think finding people that are safe. I also think redefining your, whether it's relationship or perspective on vulnerability, right? There's the idea that vulnerability is weakness as men. You're like crying in front of somebody or sharing something hard is weakness. But in reality, I always go by that internal feeling. If I don't want to do something and it feels really hard, then that's probably the right thing to do. But that's also, it takes strength to do. So re-examining your relationship with being vulnerable, that no, it's not weakness. It's actually, it takes courage to be vulnerable, and it takes strength, because if you're not, then, it just eats up inside.
That's good.
Yeah. So what's the next?
What's next on the list? Fear of failure as a parent or partner, which kind of can also be wrapped up as disappointing the people you love.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, like I said, you and I have a very communicative relationship. We talk about everything. It's almost gross that, how much we text and talk throughout the day. But
especially because we're usually in the same room.
Yes. Yeah. Owning a business together. But there's that. But there's also, I need to rethink of how I could have lost my train of thought there.
Fear of failure as a parent or partner, disappointing the people you love.
There's also this idea that I don't want to let you down, and I don't want to let the kids down. And there's a lot of times that, even though we share this business together and we both do the same amount of work on this business, there's times I just feel like the weight of the world is on my shoulders, and whether it's, financial or, emotional. And there's a distinct fear of, if something were to happen, that I'm going to let all the people down in my life that I love and that I care about. And if you give into that, then it's what we talked about earlier too. Well, then I'm just not going to talk about that, and I'm just going to continue to carry this weight alone. And that goes as a partner or as a parent, that, I don't want to let them down. That guilt also is real, like parent guilt, when you're making decisions based on guilt, sometimes it's not the right decision either.
Well, and I think that can lead to irritability. It can lead to, again, not being vulnerable. It can lead to taking it out on your kids. I think every parent out there, okay, I'm going to take that back. I think there are some parents that don't have a fear of failure because they just shouldn't be parents in the first place.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But those of us who are parents that care and love our children, fear as a parent is probably fear of failure as a parent is probably a bigger fear for me than fear of failure as a partner. Like it is a worry every day, because I don't know that there's any way that you can, if there's a parent out there that feels like they're doing a stand-up great job, please let me know how you're doing it, because I think, at least me, I feel ill-equipped to be a parent probably 99% of the time.
Especially for teenagers.
Yes. But teenagers is such a fun stage too. Like, I really am enjoying it. But the bigger they get, the bigger the problems, right?
Mhm.
So when they're little, the problems are little.
Mhm.
And they're stressful because, you're trying to teach them how to be a human. But then as they get bigger, the problems get bigger. And you're not only trying to teach them how to be a human, but you're trying to teach them how to be a good one. And so, especially when, I think the biggest thing for me has been trying to heal myself as a person. I can't help my kids. I can't be a good parent. I can't be who I want to be as a partner and a spouse if I am not healing myself, because no matter how hard you try, you can do all the right things. You can pack the lunches. You can show up at the school events. But if you're not present, if you are, teaching your kids to avoid hard conversations instead of talking about their feelings, it doesn't matter how many school performances you show up at, because you're passing down this unhealed trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am by far not a perfect human being or parent or partner, but I will say, trying to heal myself through therapy to undo, everybody has trauma. So to not undo, but to process through mine so that I can show up as a better partner and parent has been probably the best thing I could have done for myself. I'm far from perfect, but showing my kids that, and showing you that it's important to me to process through those things and do them differently, I think has helped a lot.
Well, and I think if you're not putting in the work on yourself, one of the first things that goes is being present. And, your kids, they don't need you to be perfect. They just want you to be there. And yes, I don't mean just showing up at the school performances, but we had a family dinner last night and we were all talking and joking and all of that. But it's that presence that they crave more than, just showing up. And I'll tell you, the first thing to go for me is being present in the moment when I'm, you know, not working on myself, when I'm stressed, when I'm all of those things, my presence goes. That's the first thing. So I think that, kids crave that. And you do too. If you're talking to me and I'm just zoning off, watching TV, looking at my phone, I think that is one thing you and I don't both do pretty well is we're almost never on our phones when we're talking to each other. But again, if that presence is there, that's a foundation for everything else. You're not having the hard conversations. You're not teaching them empathy. You're not teaching them how to talk to people. You're just present, or you're just there, not present. And I think that's such an important part. If you're not willing to work on yourself, that goes, at least it does for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, just having the awareness and recognizing that everybody has generational trauma, right? I mean, there are studies now that show that your trauma is passed down through your DNA. So everybody has, if you are in a bubble that you didn't grow up with any kind of trauma, and that's not to say that, you have bad parents or they didn't do things right or whatever. I mean, everybody has it, whether it's from your parents, whether it's from life experiences, whether it's from something that happened in college, whatever. Everybody has it. So accepting that, recognizing it, and being willing to put in the work so that you don't bring that home to your spouse, so that you don't pass that down to your kids. I think, accepting that imperfection and always being willing to put in the work to change it is important.
Well, yeah. I mean, we had a conversation when we were on our walk yesterday about, we were talking about therapy and, how to get that out there for people, because there's nobody that couldn't benefit from sitting down with a professional and talking through what they've been through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, That's,
It doesn't have to be forever either.
no, yeah, it could be short term. You're stressed out in this moment,
Mhm.
but literally everybody can benefit from it.
Yeah. Just like I said, even if it's just to help you process through something you're going through currently so that it doesn't build and build and build and build, right?
Yeah. I mean, and although I suspect if you have that good relationship with your therapist and it's helping, because again, and I've said this on other podcasts, maybe your first therapist doesn't work for you,
Mm-hmm.
but finding that good relationship, having that well to go back to,
Mm-hmm.
because we live a life of uncertainty, and you can be good now, then something bad happens and you go and you talk through it and you work through it. And then, you're fine for a year or two and then something else happens, but having that relationship that you can jump back in if you need to as well.
Mm-hmm. I think, too, just some other ideas for when you do screw up as a parent or a partner is apologizing quickly
And sincerely.
and sincerely. Something that we're working on with our teenagers.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That's not sorry.
Yeah. But yes, apologizing sincerely and quickly, and then having expectations that are communicated for everybody, whether that's for your kids, because how can they fail or disappoint you or make a mistake if you aren't telling them what your rules and expectations are, right? And it's the same thing with a partner, having those expectations communicated clearly, because you can't read my mind and I can't read yours, right?
Right. And well, unmet expectations start resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not communicating those expectations, then you're going to end up in resentment, right? Because how do you know what I am expecting of you if I don't tell you?
Right.
Then that goes back to what we even talked about earlier: is that being present and having those having the ability to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which kind of rolls into fear of intimacy and connection.
Well, yeah, and you can't necessarily have intimacy and connection on the best level if you're not being vulnerable. So we already talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's scary to put yourself out there, right?
Yeah.
It's scary to, because you're worried about that rejection,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if I'm putting my heart out to this person and I get rejected, then that hurts. Hurts worse than getting punched in the face. I've been punched in the face a lot, and that hurts, your heart. So I think that's a natural fear that a lot of people have, of having that real connection, because when you have it, you have a lot to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And fear of losing that, that's when people can get into like self-sabotage and all the stuff that comes along with the fear of that types of true connection or intimacy with another person.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that a lot while I was dating. There was a big fear of that connection because, like you said, that connection can be lost. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's, again, I think men have a little bit harder of a time with this than women do. I think women in most relationships value that deep connection with people. Mm-hmm. And I think men too, if they have unresolved trauma, unresolved issues, it's really difficult. I mean, again, I've seen it in women too, but I think there's a big fear of forming that connection with somebody because that leaves your heart open.
Yeah. Let's say you do find that person and you're vulnerable with them, or you're trying and you get shut down, and that happens repeatedly, then that's going to build that pattern in yourself. And when you find someone that is wanting to have that connection and be open with you, you're just waiting for it to go away, right? You're afraid that you're going to lose that on so many different levels. Like, and even like in our relationship, something I really value is like affection. Like, just you walk by and put your hand on my back as you walk by. And I remember early in our relationship, I communicated to you, like, I'm just really afraid that that's going to go away. Mm-hmm. Because was where I came from. And it hasn't. But that was a huge fear of mine. And it was like almost pervasive at times because, again, you don't want to lose this thing. And I think a lot of people, again, just slip into that self sabotage.
Mhm.
Well, it's going to end up there anyway.
So, well, yeah, they just don't even try.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, but that to me is like, I don't know, a core value for me is authenticity.
Mhm.
And so I really struggle. I can't really have relationships with people if they're not authentic. So I think for me, connection is probably top of the list of importance because you can't have connection without authenticity, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'll tell you, this was one of the hardest things for me personally in my personal life to overcome was how to get past that fear and how to build a connection in my personal life. Because for so long at work, I had relationships with people that were, business and friendships, but to now you and I finally, we get together and you're a lot further down on your path of, again, you said valuing that connection and that authenticity than I was. And my go-to so often, and still something I'm working on, is avoiding a hard conversation. And I would love to say that I'm there because I'm in therapy and, I don't avoid the hard conversations and I'm willing to sit down and communicate. And, I'm definitely better than I was when we first got together. But it's a work in progress. It's something I always have to be aware of because my go-to is to just not have the hard conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've talked about it in therapy and I've worked on it with, like I said, with my therapist on, okay, how can I do that? What are some tools in that moment? And I think some of it for me is, and it comes from, we'll be real, like having PTSD and my body being kind of off kilter because I care so much about what you think when I feel that we might even just be having a disagreement, not a fight, but I feel my body like shoot up, like my heart rate's up. And it's the only relationship that happens to me in it, and not with the kids or with friends or all of that. And so I've had to work on my therapist with ways to calm that. And he's talked about that because my fight or flight response can be so messed up after all the things that I've been through that my body doesn't recognize the difference. I could still go out and, be involved in like a conflict with a stranger and not feel a thing. Like not feel a thing, not have my heart rate up, not have all of that. But, you and I are having a minor disagreement and it's like my heart is racing and he's given me some tools to, mitigate that. And I'm not going to get too in depth to those tools because he's a professional, right? Like, it's something to be aware of. And so trying to work on that and communicate even how I'm feeling in that moment with you so you can understand and be empathetic and try to like ground myself and try to communicate better and understand, okay, I'm feeling this right now. And there's a host of reasons why I am, but I don't have to let that control me. I still have a choice on how I act and what I say that I can still, validate. I can still be empathetic in those moments. But I would say me personally, the biggest blocker for, that connection is that it's avoiding. And then when I don't, because, sometimes it's easier to not have the conversation, but that builds resentment. And then that comes around in a different way. But okay, I can still choose when I'm feeling this to calm myself down, to have the conversation, to communicate, to give you the opportunity to communicate. But yeah, it's still something that I've struggled with, and I still am.
Is there maybe one other tool you could share besides communication that he's given you?
Well, it's when your body is having a response,
Mm-hmm.
controlling your breathing
Mm-hmm.
is a big one. So because when your blood is up, you're taking, shallow rapid breaths. And because of that, you're not oxygenating your blood how you should. And like, so taking back control of your body in that moment. And it's almost like you step out of your body and like see that this is happening. Take a couple breaths, slow yourself down, maybe communicate and step away from the conversation for a minute and like, bring it back down and then come back to the conversation. A couple different things that, he's talked about with me, but really just understanding that in those moments, if your blood is up, you still have a choice on how you respond, how you act. Take some deep breaths, slow it down, and again, then start communicating, but also communicating how you feel in those moments. I think that's one thing you're really good at, is understanding that. So when I start talking about how I'm feeling, like even in this moment, my body, like that gives you an idea of the perspective I'm coming from too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Lastly, fear of change.
Well, yeah. I mean, how many big changes have we had in our life in the last couple of years?
Yeah.
Like even, the easy one is retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I retired in the beginning of 24, it was a huge change. I was with the police department since I was 18. It was all I ever knew.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had one job before I got on the police department, working for the Parks and Rec in Henderson. Other than that, that's all I knew. And now no longer am I a police officer. I never wear a uniform again, never drive lights and sirens and do all the fun stuff that I loved. And because of that, there was a huge change in my perspective and how I identify myself, or how I find value in myself and what I'm doing. And, I don't necessarily miss the stress of being a captain, but I miss being a cop. Right. And, I also miss some of the people that I saw on a daily basis, which sometimes when you're retired, it's out of sight, out of mind. They have all their own problems and trauma and stuff to deal with. So
it can be, anything. Retirement. It could be changing jobs. It could be leaving a job. It could be getting a divorce.
Getting a divorce and moving out on your own,
mm-hmm.
starting a new relationship, getting it, marrying somebody, moving in with someone. All of these are huge changes, and there's fear to that. But I think when we are afraid of making these big changes, we stop growth. We stop growing, and that you think about being resilient and being able to perform after these big changes and big, even trauma, but just change in your worldview. And if you never seek those changes because of fear, then how do you grow?
There's 2 mantras that I live by. And one is keep going. Mm-hmm. And the other is take the leap of faith. And I think sometimes with big changes, that is sometimes the only thing you can do is, somewhere deep in your soul that there's a reason that you're being pushed in the direction that you are. And the only thing that's going to get you to the other side is taking that leap of faith. Right. Mm-hmm. And yes, leaving a marriage, leaving a job, starting a new one, all of it is, there are so many unknowns. There's so many reasons not to, because it's easy to want to stay comfortable and stay where you're at, right? But I think, at least for me, when those big changes in life have come up, sometimes all I could do was just take the leap of faith.
Yeah. And, getting out of your comfort zone, but trusting. And that leap of faith, well, I love that, because it can also be valuable, but being something different to different people. Mm-hmm. If you are very religious, that leap of faith may be different than somebody that isn't religious, but maybe that faith is faith in themselves, mm-hmm. Faith in what they've done in the past, or maybe it is faith in God. And, this path is for you, and you need to do it. So I love that. And in so many times in life, even, from when we were friends, you've told me that, just keep going. And we do that in life. We do that with our kids. We do that in business. We just have to keep going and trust that,
the leap of faith is the one we're supposed to take. Mm-hmm. And I think too, a big way to mitigate any of those big changes that life throws your way is reminding yourself of why you made the change in the first place. Mm-hmm. Right? Like when I left, just like when you left the police department, when I left the police department, I mean, there were many reasons why. And I had to And still, sometimes, like we were talking about in the previous episode, sometimes it'd be easier to go back to a W-2 job.
For sure.
But, reminding myself why I left, reminding ourselves why we started this business, reminding yourself why you're getting a divorce, right? Reminding yourself why you want to continue to put yourself out there and date people. It's easy to be complacent and comfortable. It's a lot harder to take those leaps of faith and make those big changes. But if you can remind yourself why you're doing it and anchor yourself in that, I think you brought up a good point before we started this episode, was anchoring yourself to purpose, right?
Yeah, it's okay. So for a very long time, my purpose was, whatever role I had at the police department, whether it was K9 leadership, being a captain over the strip or wellness bureau, that was my purpose. And it was pretty easily defined, right? I know, what my job is, what I need to do. But now you retire and you take that leap of faith. I had to work to identify what my purpose is now. And, we kind of knew what we wanted to do and have an impact and, share and teach cops and businesses and leaders around the country. But it wasn't until I started doing it that I had to really identify and anchor myself in that purpose of, now I get to help people. I've had all of these experiences, some of them I handled well, some of them I handled not so well. But because of my journey and my expertise and what I've been through, I'm uniquely situated to help people and have that impact. And so now that's my purpose. And I get to see it every time I go teach. I was just in Ohio teaching, and I had several people come up to me and talk to me and like, hey, I went through some very similar things that you have. And the way that you presented it and the tools that you gave, it really hit home for me. And, I have that benefit of people kind of reaffirming that purpose that, I had identified after I retired, but that's helped me so much as something to remember and have that positive from. Is this is our purpose now, and it's mine now that I had this big change. So again, reminding yourself why you did it in the first place, because sometimes you can also look at the past with rose-colored glasses, like, oh, well, I love being a cop. Yeah, but there's also, by the end of my career, a lot of stress and things that were having a deep impact on me. And now we have this new adventure that is very stressful at times. But at the end of the day, we have that purpose, and it's helping a lot of people, and we've seen it. And that's what gives me value now in what I'm doing and what we're doing.
Yeah. Or, if you're getting divorced, anchoring yourself to the purpose, reminding yourself why you did it, anchoring yourself to your new purpose. And maybe that's figuring out who you are and learning to love that person. And that is your purpose right now in that moment. So I love actually those three things together: taking the leap of faith, reminding yourself why you did it, and then anchoring yourself to your new purpose.
Yeah. And I think if you apply those to any big change in your life, I think you'll get through it. Yeah. And, find joy and happiness and contentment. Happiness is kind of at the extreme, but being content in what you're doing, that's great. So.
Yeah. Good job.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
So, well, thank you for listening today. This was kind of a little different than some of the ones that we've talked about, but I thought we were able to kind of put some good information out there. And, I even in talking about it and putting it out with you, I know it's helped me. So again, thank you for listening. If you like the podcast, please share it with a friend or subscribe, leave a review. And if you liked what we talked about, there's more in the book, The Courage to Live. You can find it on Amazon, The Courage to Live by Josh Bitsko. And I appreciate you spending time with me today.